TED Talks. Ideas worth banning. You guys may have not known this, but you know TED Talks, right? You know, our favorite little wonderful TED Talks where they have like these really unprecedented talks about education, technology, science. And I actually really like TED. They've actually had the balls to go forward and criticize, allow talks that criticize education, the education dogma. The problem is that TED is still a slave to the science dogma. And I don't know if you guys knew this, but TED has a long history of banning some of their talks that don't fall within a very rigid scientific set of guidelines. One example here is Dr. Terry Wahls' Minding Your Mitochondria TED Talk. Look at here on the front screen right here. Literally, they added an annotation onto the video that lasts throughout the entire video. It says, this talk, which was filmed at an independent TEDx event, falls outside TEDx's curatorial guidelines. Read more below. Now, if you go below, it says, note from TED. This talk, which features health advice based on a personal narrative, has been flagged as potentially outside TED's curatorial guidelines. Now, what curatorial guidelines are they talking about? They're talking about TED's anonymous scientific board, because this isn't the only one that's been banned. Rupert Sheldrake gave a talk not too long ago titled, it's down here, The Science Delusion, where he talks about some of the fundamental dogmatic assumptions that science abides by that are based on faith and belief, yet masquerade as if it's based on empirical evidence. I'll get into that in a moment. But right here, The Science Delusion, it was uploaded to Vimeo, taken off the main YouTube channels, and it was put there because there was such a backlash against Rupert Sheldrake's highly rational, highly sane, criticism of modern science. TED actually banned it because their scientific board didn't allow it. Mind you, it's an anonymous scientific board, and according to TED's own website here, in response to the debate about Rupert Sheldrake's talk that was banned, right here, the official TED announcement says, a number of questions were raised about TED's science board, how it works, and why the member list isn't public. So this science board is anonymous. All right. Our science board is 5 members, all working scientists or distinguished science journalists. When we encounter a scientific talk that raises questions, they advise us on their position. I and my team here at TED make the final decisions. We keep the names of the science board members private. This is a common practice for science review boards in the academic world, which preserves the objectivity of the recommendations and also protects the participants from retribution or harassment. So number one, the justification for having an anonymous scientific board is that it preserves the objectivity of the recommendation. How does that preserve the objectivity of any recommendations? By keeping private what individuals are determining your views on science. You know, there's more to science than just people seeking truth. People can be corrupted. Scientists can be corrupted. They can be bought. They can be funded by certain industries. So they change studies and they change outcomes and results. If you're really interested in objectivity and transparency, make them public so we can at least know who they are. You know, it was not too long ago, a study came out saying grains are good for you. Now, there's been a lot of doubts and criticisms that grains are not good for you. And the irony, of course, is that the company that came out with the study, at the end of the study, it says, conflict of interest warning. This study was funded and researched by a member of the Grains Foundation for America or something like that. He may have financial interests in skewing the results. The point is that you don't want to keep these board of scientific members anonymous to protect objectivity. We want to know who they are so we can be sure that they're not taking money from industries to skew results, to skew biases. And of course, the other justification is that it protects the participants from retribution or harassment. Well, then you're a coward. Then this anonymous scientific board are people who are afraid of their own opinions. What are they afraid of? Maybe they're afraid of people calling them out for their dogma, for their biases. Another example of a video that TED uploaded to their TEDx independent talks but put a disclaimer is this one right here, the Happy Breatharian. This TED talk, which was filmed at an independent TEDx event, falls outside TEDx's curatorial guidelines. And again, it's another scientific board breach. And so what's really sad here, my friends, is that, you know, on one case you have a doctor, okay, a certified doctor, Dr. Terry Wahls, who literally cured her MS by changing her diet. Now, if you go to a mainstream hospital, if you read mainstream journals and mainstream scientific results, you're told you got to take Copaxone and all types of fucking medication for your MS. And yet this lady changed her freaking diet and she went from a wheelchair to running marathons in like 6 months or a year. Okay? Yeah, and it's been now the video's got 1.5 million views and people have tried it themselves. A lot of people have similar success. What more of a study do you want than people applying a method and getting results? But you see, anything that falls out of an extreme, anything that falls outside the bounds of mainstream science's very narrow scope of what is possible is considered dogma, is considered unscientific, and you're freaking you're deemed a pseudoscientist. But see, the reason that science is actually at fault here, the mainstream science, not all. There are some components of science that don't fall for these problems. So some components of science, different sects, different leaders and pioneers are open to the nature of reality. But the mainstream general consensus in science nowadays is that we live in a purely material physical world. And it's from that presupposition about the fundamental nature of reality that then affects every single other conclusion you make. If you believe reality is fundamentally comprised of the stuff we call matter that is permanent, bound by the laws of physics, and they are unchanging no matter what we do, and we're bound by them for the rest of eternity, as long as you believe that, then anything that goes against that presupposition, that belief system, is going to seem outside the realm of possibility. The realm of possibility, you're going to call it pseudoscience, and you're going to put disclaimers on freaking TED Talks that offer legitimate advice to people or legitimate criticisms of science and hold them back from, you know, spreading some actual truth instead of a skewed version of truth. Now, to clarify one final point here, on what I was saying before, the fact is that believing reality is fundamentally comprised of matter is a belief. It is a belief system, and here's why. When you believe, it's a leap of faith. When you believe in a world that is fundamentally comprised of matter, along with that, mainstream science tells us that this world of matter is all bound by mechanistic, deterministic, causal, cause and effect actions. If I have this bottle in my hand and I drop it, it falls because the force of gravity pulled it down, and then it hit the table, and the texture of this and the weight of it caused it to bounce back up a couple times, and on and on and on. Miracles are not allowed in the realm of science. Things that happen out of nothing, things that just pop in and out of existence without explanation, that is called a miracle. That is called superstition by science, and it deems it as a fraud pending an actual materialistic explanation. So here's the problem. Here's the catch. Here's where science ends up biting itself in the ass. When it demands that everything must have this physical reality, causal explanation, cause and effect. I throw this up, it falls down because of the neurochemistry in my brain flick this way, switch that way, causing my hand to move, my arm to throw it up, down, etc. You then must require a physical explanation for everything in the universe, including the universe itself. And this is where the contradiction comes into place. And science relies on you not asking these deep questions in order for it to get away with this belief, this leap of faith, that physical reality is fundamental and the foundational truth of reality. So hear me out here. If everything that happens in the universe, everything that exists requires a mechanistic explanation for how it exists and how it operates, then the same is true for the universe itself. And science in general will tell you that the universe arose from the Big Bang, but the Big Bang doesn't really explain anything. Yeah, it would explain that there was a tiny dense point of matter that exploded out, and that's how the universe developed, but it doesn't tell you what caused the thing that caused the Big Bang. See, if that dense point of matter either A, just appeared out of nowhere without a causal explanation, then that goes against the very premise that science put forth, that we live in a purely mechanistic, material, physical world. So on that level alone, that's a contradiction. If it came out of nothing, that's poof, out of nowhere, that's magic, that's superstition, that's Jesus curing the blind by waving his hand. Not possible. Science does not allow that. The other typical explanation currently associated with the Big Bang is that the universe always existed. It didn't pop out of nothing, it just always existed. Well, again, that's not a sufficient answer, because saying it always existed is another way of saying it never had a beginning. Because if you think about it, that's what infinity means. Infinity on both ends, whether at the beginning or the edge of infinity, on both sides of infinity, there's no actual end or a beginning. Which is, again, it's just the same as saying it came out of nothing. It's not a sufficient answer if you're going to be a general mainstream scientist and say that everything that exists must have a causal explanation for it. So these are inherent contradictions. This isn't a God of thy gaps argument, by the way. It's not like I'm saying, oh yeah, well, you know, the only reason, it's not like I'm using the fact that we don't know what happened prior to the Big Bang and using that mystery as like proof that supernatural is possible. I don't even really believe in the supernatural. I think if anything exists, it must be explicable, but it may not necessarily be explicable within the general scientific belief, the leap of faith that matter and reality is fundamentally comprised of this physical stuff, which is 97% empty space. Atoms are 90-something% empty space. But that's a little side note. So it really comes back to that. It just comes back to this idea that when you believe in something without it being consistent, science has put itself up to its own contradictions. Again, I'm not using the God of the gaps argument. Science itself is saying reality must be consistent, mechanistic, based on these material, physical world properties of reality. So if you take science's word for it, then there is no actual consistent explanation for how the universe came to be in the first place. And science is the first one demanding that you ask a question that way. It's not me. I'm not using the God of the gaps argument. It has nothing to do with what happened before the Big Bang. It doesn't matter what happened. In the very logic of mainstream materialistic science, okay, everything must have a causal explanation for its existence. But if you follow that logic all the way through into the entirety of the universe and a full all-encompassing perspective of reality, you realize that it's actually not possible, that it actually contradicts itself when you get to the origin of reality. Because then you realize that even if you get to the beginning, even if you find out what happened before the Big Bang, you still got to find out what happened before the thing that caused the Big Bang, and before the thing that caused the thing that caused the Big Bang, and on and on and on and on. And you'll never get an answer because science itself, by its own premise that the world is fundamentally comprised of matter in a mechanistic, deterministic world, science itself is requiring that contradiction. It's not me, it's science. Okay, it's a contradiction. Belief that the world is fundamentally comprised of matter is in itself a contradiction. Okay, so again, that's why, you know, the board TED of the TED Talk, you know, it's when they ban certain talks, they are banning it from a place of their own religion, of their own belief system. Okay, science is a belief system. It is the religion of believing that reality is fundamentally comprised of matter. That matter is primary, first and foremost. Matter. It's a religious belief system. And anything that falls outside of that leap of faith, that Big Bang causality problem leap of faith, that something came from nothing, is then considered to be pseudoscience and banned, even if it has massive effects for people. So really, Ted, you know, you guys are great, you guys are revolutionary, but you're really, really lagging behind because you're subservient to some, you know, anonymous science board. Free yourself from some dumb anonymous science board and realize that science today is its own frickin' religion, is its own dogma, is its own pseudoscience, ironically.